So many years ago, my sister graduated from college. She graduated from NYU, and they were having the graduation outdoors in Washington Square Park in the middle of Greenwich Village. It was just a magnificent day. We were all looking forward to it. We got there very early. We wanted to make sure that we got good seats. So we were actually lined up to get into the area where this graduation was to take place. And we had a line, and suddenly this guy cuts the line. Now, I was there with my family, including my grandparents, who obviously were older. And I was about to say something, but before I got a chance, my grandmothers, both like tough old birds, said something to him. Now, this guy, of all the things he could have said, he could have apologized. Uh, he could have made up some kind of an excuse. Oh, I didn't realize the line was here. He could have done something. And he decides to get legalistic / philosophical about it. So he looks at them and he actually has the goal to say, what is the definition of a line? Can you imagine? We call that chutzpah. So now I'm here and I am getting PO'd, right? These are my grandmothers, and this is what he's doing. He's going to hold his position not only in the line, but he's trying to declare that he's right. And I guess the first thing I thought in my head is, what is the definition of a line? Well, it's the shortest distance between 2 points, or when we're talking about people, it's could be defined as a queue where people stand in a row in order to wait for something, to get in somewhere, for example. And I'm going through all these things in my head, but here's what I ultimately chose. I looked at the guy and I said something to the effect of, well, based on the strict definition of an asshole, you are not one, but I think we all know better. And I looked at him menacingly enough where he knew he better get out of the way. So he ultimately did. But in thinking about this story, it just got me to think about the importance of definitions, of words. I don't think we give them enough importance. I don't think our institutions give them enough importance. Knowledge is increasing by the moment. I mean, we have whole new fields of study, and we have more access to knowledge than ever. In your hand, you hold every piece of information that was ever created. Access to every piece of information that was ever created. Literally, I mean, it's a scary thought. And as technology increases, there is so much more to know, but there's no such thing as knowing something without knowing the terms about it. Any discipline, the study of anything, ultimately comes down to the study of its words. And so if words are ill-defined, then you don't have access to that knowledge. I'm thinking in part about the Tower of Babel, right? Famous story in the Bible. It's considered I think a parable by most. Maybe it literally happened. I don't know. But it's about a bunch of people who decided that they wanted to build a tower to the heavens, to God. They felt as if they were the equal of God, or at least they would be once they built this tower. And God saw this, and instead of just smiting them, which is always an option, isn't it? Nice to have that kind of power. He decided to do something else. He decided to make it so that each person spoke a different language. Before that instant, according to this parable, there was only one language on earth. And everyone spoke it. Therefore, everyone understood each other. By making it so that everyone speaks or spoke a different language, he made it so they can no longer understand each other. In the absence of understanding, there is only confusion. There's no such thing as human relations when understanding is zero, or at least it's very, very difficult. I don't know if in the story it ended up that they were all at each other's throats and warring, but it very easily could have come to that, right? The frustration of not being able to understand something. Did you ever experience that? I mean, is that not a daily occurrence? And generally, it's not even the concept that we cannot understand. It's simply the words that are mis or ill defined. So these are the importance of words. Now, this is true for me as it is true for every other professional. It is true for anybody who is in relationship with anybody else, right? I mean, Voltaire said that if you want to have a conversation, you must first define your words. Otherwise, there's nothing to talk about. When there's no common agreement on the meaning of the words, what is there to talk about? How can you have a conversation or a debate? It's apples and oranges, right? So in terms of ill-defined, we have terms to define ill-defined terms. Things like apples and oranges, different metaphors like that. And it's true. So if you're a professional, for example, like myself, whose job or part of the job is to teach people things, then you must ensure that they can understand the words. Now, I've done this to varying degrees of success. I literally stopped giving out a manual. The manual was written in such a way where the words were complicated, not defined, and it just caused a lot of confusion. So I got rid of it. That's one way to make sure that there's not misunderstanding, is to just get rid of things that are causing more confusion instead of causing clarity. I think everyone desires clarity and order. For some reason, when people come to me, when they embark on a weight loss program, they make the decision. That decision is often followed by a real feeling of overwhelm, like they bit off too much. And I'm doing nobody any favors if I'm then confusing them further. So got rid of that book. Some of the biggest wins that I've had with people have taken place before they even did a program, simply by helping them define words. I know that sounds weird, but there's something very liberating. It's how learning happens. It's how breakthroughs happen sometimes. It happens very often when I talk about things called hormone disruptors. Okay, just so everybody knows, I've talked about this before. Hormones are chemicals in the body that control almost everything in the body. Okay, so hormones control sleep, they control appetite, they control weight loss, weight gain, pretty much everything in the body. Mood. So there are literally chemicals in the environment that are called hormone disruptors. And of course, they disrupt the hormones that is very specifically named. Hormones play a big factor in metabolism, which, as everyone knows, has to do with losing weight. It has to do with other things as well. We're going to define that shortly, because I'm all about clearing things up right now. Okay. But the point is that when I explain to people about hormone disruptors, these are chemicals that are not only in our environment, but they're in the very products that we put on ourselves. Personal care products, skin care and moisturizers and makeup and hair care, and it just goes on and on and on, right? So we explain this. Okay, what do you think hormone disruptors do, and what do you think they are? Well, obviously they disrupt my hormones. Absolutely. Now, were you aware that some of these hormones are considered obesogens? Obesogens? My God, what is that? Okay, let's look at the word. Let's break that down. What does obese mean? Well, obese means overweight, over fat. Yes, absolutely. Okay. What about this word, gens? It's not really a word. It's more of a suffix, gens. Okay. Well, I don't know. I'm not sure. Well, okay. Think about it. Think about words like genesis and genes and generations and things like that. You're like, Genesis in the beginning. Okay. These are chemicals that begin or start or create obesity. Yes, that's what they are. And then they have this like crazy breakthrough realization. Oh my God, I'm putting this crap on my skin. That's getting into me. Absolutely. So this is the power of words. Pardon me. Let me take a sip. Salud. Words are symbols. They represent things. What do they represent? They represent either actual things, cars, bicycles, houses, horses, or they represent ideas, thoughts, opinions, right? And those ideas themselves represent ideas, or they represent actual things, right? Your thoughts about cars. Okay. So the way to access that, if you're trying to get to the concepts, if you're trying to get to the actual things, if you want to understand how, cars run, and you're learning about that, for the most part, you're going to learn from a book. The book consists of words. The words represent those ideas and concepts. So it is the key that unlocks the door to understanding those concepts and those actual substantive things. Does that make sense? So the kindest thing that we can do for people sometimes is, instead of giving metaphors, instead of giving examples, is just to make sure that they understand the foundational words. And I want to take a minute to do that right now, but with only a few, because otherwise it gets boring, it gets overwhelming. Now, I must tell you that sometimes there's such confusion about words that they've evolved to mean things that they're really not, that it can be hard to undo those understandings and replace it with the actual meanings and understandings. I run into that every day. People can't hear me when I talk about certain words and concepts because they have it in their mind. Right? I know we've talked about this before. For those of you who watch often, you've heard some of these ideas before. But the very meaning of the word weight. People come to me to lose weight. It's actually an unfortunate expression. Because it's an unfortunate expression, it actually changes kind of people's GPS and their directions, and it puts it in the wrong way, because weight loss and fat loss are not the same thing. Let's take a look at the words. I wrote them down. Look at all the work I've done. Jesus, I care about you people. Okay. The definition of weight is the force acting on an object due to gravity. Now, this is kind of a geeky scientific explanation, but that's what it is. It's the force, it's the pressure that's acting on some kind of a body, generally the earth, right? And it's as a result of the gravitational force, the gravitational pull, the thing that keeps us on the earth as opposed to floating away from it. Right? If you've ever seen those movies, right, when people go to the moon, suddenly they're floating in their spaceships. There's not as much gravity, and that's why they're floating, right? So gravity is that force that keeps us close or stuck to the earth, right? And weight, therefore, is the amount of gravity. Another way to say it is the relative heaviness. What does that have to do with fat? Well, it's one of these things where it's overlapping, but it's not the same thing. Okay. The more fat a person has, the more force they will exert upon the earth. They just have, it's more stuff. But there are people who are very overweight who don't have an ounce of fat, who are very overweight, right? In other words, more than they're supposed to be based on those charts. Losing weight is not what most people want to do. Most people want to lose fat. Weight is not the enemy. Weight is simply a force against the earth. Now, if you don't know this, then you're okay with losing weight by losing anything. By losing fat, by losing muscle, by losing water, by losing organs, by losing limbs. The body has about 10 to 12 pounds of blood circulating in it. Okay. If we withdraw half your blood, you're going to lose 6 pounds instantly. Have I done you a favor? I mean, I know it sounds silly and absurd, but if people have their whole focus on losing weight and they're not distinguishing between the kind of weight you're supposed to lose and the kind of weight you're not supposed to lose, then they might take wrong actions. This is part of the problem with things like Ozempic. Ozempic causes a person to lose a lot of water and muscle. And that's why there's such a thing called Ozempic face and Ozempic butt. Okay. The butt, the glutes are big muscles. And when people lose that, you know, that they get a saggy butt. So I know I've beaten that to death a little bit, but it is an important distinction, and learning has everything to do with distinctions, right? Definitions have to do with distinctions. They have to do with defining parameters. You know, this thing is this, it's not that. We learn in relation to other things. Okay. So what is fat then? Well, fat is a form of body tissue. Tissue meaning the material that different parts of the body is made of. There's different kinds of tissues or materials within the body. Okay. So it's a form of body tissue on animals. It's a squishy layer that stores energy and protects organs. So part of that definition is what it is. Part of that definition is kind of what it does, the basic concept. This is a simple definition. You can go into a scientific definition, which is much harder to understand because you're going to have to define a whole tree of words, and that's super annoying, right? So we're not going to do that. But you'll also notice that we have this thing called fat, and that's a noun, the way we defined it, right? But it could also be an adjective, right? That person is fat. So they have too much tissue. They have too much fatty tissue. As a result, they are fat, or they are over fat, right? Because we are supposed to have fat. Fat is a good thing. Sometimes when a person comes in, we'll do our body composition analysis, which is a test that shows a person how much of their weight is made of fat. So basically it shows a person tissues, the relative amount of different tissues they have in their body, right? So it'll break it down. You have this much fat, this much muscle, this much water, etc. So the person will see that on and inside their body, they have 80 pounds of fat on them. And I'll say, well, how much fat do you want? And they'll say, well, 0. Right? That's a misunderstanding of the necessity of fat, of what it does. It protects organs. It does some other things that are not mentioned here. This is, again, a very basic definition. But, you know, every cell has some fat in it. Every cell in the body. It's absolutely important to us. Right? So There's that noun, there's that adjective. There are other definitions of fat as well, right? There's fat, we hear like good healthy fats, right? So in the case of that, fat then is a nutritional substance. It's one of what we call our macronutrients, right? Let's talk about that. Oh, I didn't write it down. Okay. So macronutrients, those are the food substances, the nutritious substances that we need, or the nutrients that we need in large amounts. And they break down very simply into fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. Okay? In order to survive, we need those in large amounts, as opposed to micronutrients. Micronutrients are nutrients that we need in small amounts, and they have more specific functions in the body. Okay, pretty simple, but fats are a nutritious substance, right? They're a macronutrient that has to do with energy. So that makes sense, right? If you have a food that has a lot of fat in it, or that's made of fat, like take an avocado as a classic example, that has a lot of energy in it. Now, we can talk about energy and we can talk about metabolism. I did not want to define too many words at one time. I don't want to satisfy anybody's thirst with a fire hose. But I did want you to understand this concept about the importance of words, about how they're even more important these days than they were at any other time in history. We need to know several languages now, and we don't have to be fluent in them, but we need to know languages. Everyone here has had some frustration with something online. Try to navigate the back end of Facebook. It is really, really hard. And you'll come across words that you simply do not know. And you don't know what it means. And you try to work with it anyway. And you're just trying to work over a blank space. Right? Okay. So I also took a few minutes, because it can't all be work. All work and no play makes us dull people. I also took a few minutes to write down some of the best songs with the word in the title. All right, let's go. Now, you'll notice most of these songs are from the 80s. And that makes sense. And that has to do with a specific word called taste. Now, when I mention taste, I am not talking about the sensory definition of taste. I am talking about the ability to discern quality from not quality, which people who grew up in the 80s definitely have, simply because of our exposure. Okay. So first song, What Are Words For? By Missing Persons. Who hasn't asked themselves that? What are words for when nobody's listening anyway? And that is the question that they pose. It's a timeless question. Number 2, Words Got in the Way by Gloria Estefan. Words can get in the way, can't they? They can get in the way of true feeling and true communication. We can hide behind them. Isn't that sad in the context of a loving relationship? That's what Gloria Estefan is trying to communicate to us. God bless her. And when she's not talking about that, she's threatening us that the rhythm is going to get us eventually. More Than Words by Extreme. I don't really know the lyrics enough to tell you what this song is about, but I think many of you know this song. I would hum it, but again, I care about you. Okay. Sorry Seems to Be the Hardest Word by Sir Elton John. This poor guy, what a heartbreaking sentiment. he expresses in this song. Sorry is the hardest word. I'm trying to think. Anti-disestablishmentarianism is hard too. But sorry, just how can you say it? Okay. And lastly, we have the classic Word Up by Cameo. I don't know what the hell this song means. I sort of know what the expression word up means, but I have no idea what this guy is going on about. He's babbling, which, by the way, now watch, let's take it full circle, is a word that comes from this parable about the Tower of Babel. Isn't that something? A couple of words do. Babylon, the country, but Babel. When somebody babbles, it means they're going on in a confusing, rambling, and incoherent way, much as I'm doing right now. Okay. And that word in turn comes from a Hebrew word that means the same thing, confusion. It doesn't mean going on, I don't think. I think it just means confusion. All right. So it is fascinating how that happens. Don't think too much about what I'm talking about now. Just get the basic concept. Words matter, meanings matter, understanding matters. This is one of the keys. It's needed more now than ever, just this basic understanding about words. I will try to do a better job with my clients about explaining things by explaining words. I personally think that all learning materials, books, etc., should come either with glossaries or with explanations in the text themselves. If you're doing some kind of a writing that's designed to teach or educate, then I think defining words within the texts are very important. Using words that are not too large. You'll notice some of our best communicators use very, very small words. So there are fewer misdefinitions. They're not definitely articulate, but they end up getting the thoughts and the concepts across because of the simplicity of the words that they choose. All right, I have a simple word for you right now. 2 of them, as a matter of fact. It's a simple phrase. I'm out. Take care, everyone. See you next week.